Reverse Pentacle for chapter 27. Ace of Clubs. The tarot card. It suddenly dawned on her that Tiba knew the identity of the perp. Unlike humans, Tiba could see in the dark and he had a good sense of smell. The problem was that the cat had no way of communicating this information to her. Lola returned to the drawing board and she was going to interview the suspects again, though this time she was going to interrogate them while the cat was in the room. It was a bit of an unorthodox interrogation technique, but this was all she had to work with. She had been real certain that Carlos was the one. As for Ken, he was doing a survey of the crime scene and he wanted to see if there was something that the other cops had missed. Carina ended up staying in Kane's house and she slept in Grandma Esther's room. And the following morning was Saturday and Carina sighed wearily while staring at the roof. And she said when she heard the sound of a drawer opening. Grandma Esther had finally returned from her cruise and she was furious about being kept in the dark about what happened to her grandson. Though truth be told, there was nothing she could do from the cruise. Carina showered and she got dressed and after a light breakfast she decided to return home. Her friend Kane was being taken care of and she wanted to believe that her presence was not needed anymore. She arrived home around noon and when she turned the key she saw that her living room was a mess. Bruno and Rodrigo were pacing about the room while looking at documents. I thought they had released Carlos, said Carina. He was set free, but he's still in check, said Bruno. What was Carlos doing near the scene of the crime, asked Carina, and why does he have sketches of Kane and even photos? He takes art classes on the weekend, said Bruno, and he can't finish a drawing during class. When he can't finish a drawing during class, he takes photos of the live models to finish his work at home. But why only men? asked Carina. I don't know, asked Professor Sebastiano. He's the guy who picks the artist model, said Bruno. Maybe he's a possible suspect, mused Rodrigo, or one of his students. It is worth checking out, said Carina, but why was he near the crime scene and the flowers? They were for Jeremy, and Carlos didn't know that Jeremy was on vacation, so he left a flower with his phone number to arrange a date, said Bruno, regurgitating everything that Carlos had told him. So Carlos is a closet case, asked Rodrigo. No, he's an artist, and he wanted Jeremy to pose for him, said Bruno. Carina was about to open her mouth, but her mother interrupted. Carina, you're distracting your cousin and your boyfriend. Your questions are doing more harm than good. Onla didn't want Carina to get involved in a police investigation. She worried that if she spoke about too much, she was going to draw the criminal's attention. Carina was a chubby, petite woman. She had no means of defending herself from a cruel, cruel world. Carina sighed wearily. If she wants to help, let her, said Bruno, enabling Carina, and he added, but if you want to interrogate someone, ask me or Rodrigo to go with you. Yay, said Carina before running off the kitchen. She proceeded to bake muffins and cookies, and Bruno watched her with cool amusement, and he was curious to see where everything was going, and once she was all set, she placed them in the car. Bruno got in the car with her, and he needed a break from his work, plus he wasn't keen on tidying up his workspace. It was better for the dead weight Rodrigo to deal with that mess. Their first stop was Irina's apartment, and the cookies were for her and her grandchildren, and after paying tribute, Irina allowed them to enter within. Irina's daughter Angelica was not amused, and she couldn't understand why her mother allowed for Carina to visit them whenever the mood struck her. She had no respect for their privacy. It's like, oh my God, another one of my second mother's crazy clients. Irina brought out her cards and her crystal ball. What seems to be the trouble, Carina? asked Irina. Kane got attacked by a vampire, and the creature is still at large. I need your help to bring that creature to justice, said Carina. A shrill laughter escaped Angelica's mouth, and this laughter was echoed by her husband and her children, and even Bruno chuckled a little. The facts of the case were indeed laughable. The only person not laughing were Carina and Irina. How sharp were his fangs? asked Irina while she shuffled the cards. They were a bit on the blunt side, and all he managed to do was give Kane a serious hickey, said Carina, or love bite. said Carina. Is that all he did? Asked Irina. Yes, said Carina. Interesting, said Irina, shuffling her deck. Can you tell me who is? Asked Carina. Of course not. Even Mother's powers had limitations, interjected Angelica. Irina brought out the perp's soul card. The chariot card represented who he was. This individual has direction, control, and willpower. He is driven but not reckless, and this wasn't a passion crime, rather a premeditated attack that took weeks, even months of planning. What about the motive? Asked Carina, leaning forward. Bruno brought out his notepad to write everything Irina said. Even if she was a charlatan, there was a method to her madness. The police had been working under the assumption that this was an opportunistic passion crime. If it was premeditated, the culprit had to be stalking his prey for a while. And how did nobody notice the stalker? Irina brought out a new card, and Carina expected to see the lost card, and she was surprised when she saw that Irina held out the power card and the 4 Ds or Pentacles. So the man wanted to have power over Cain, asked Carina, looking at the card intently. If he wanted to dominate Cain, why go about it in such a serial killer fashion? Asked Bruno. And more importantly, why would he want to dominate Cain? Cain is a cop. He represents authority, mused Marlene. There are people who have a controlling personality, said Angelica, and who was adopted from Cuba, and they are driven by high levels of anxiety to feel safe, and this anxiety gives them a desire to control their surroundings and the people to maintain a sense of order. They are unwilling to adapt to change. So what you're implying is that Cain's presence made that person feel like they were losing control of the world, mused Bruno. And since that person wasn't willing to adapt, he lashed out violently against the person that was directly responsible for all of the changes happening in his life, mused Carina, and she added, one last question. Is the criminal a stranger or someone we know? Irina shuffled the cards, and she drew 3 cards, and she explained, if the cards are face up, it is a stranger, and if they are upside down, they are someone you know. Why draw 3 cards? Asked Bruno. It is to increase accuracy, said Irina, and she flipped the cards over. The sun, the moon, and the chariot were all upside down, and she drew 2 more cards, and they were upside down as well. Is it someone we know? Said Bruno, narrowing his eyes. That doesn't help much, and most of the people we know were either on a cruise in Disney World or in another country, said Carina, rubbing her temple. Perhaps it is someone that Rodrigo knows, or maybe someone your friend knows, mused Bruno. You asked if it is someone you know. And according to the cards, this criminal is someone you know, said Irina. Carina paid Irina for her time, and she left the consultation with more questions than answers. At least they had made some progress with the investigation, or so she fancied. Bruno called Lola to picture the new working theory that the crime wasn't lust motivated, and Lola re-examined all of the photos and the videos and the physical evidence. If only we had gotten DNA from the bite mark, bemoaned Lola, and the forensic analysis had failed to recover even the smallest droplet of saliva from the bite. Other than the bite mark, Cain's body didn't show any signs of physical abuse, and this was odd considering he had been found in his bathrobe. And what was even more odd was the timing. How did the criminal know when Cain ate the drug pizza, and how did he know that the drug was finally taking effect? And he had to have been watching everything from afar, or maybe he had left a spyware in the cameras or in his cell phone. Detective Lola drove out to Cain's house to take his cell phone, and she wanted to check for spywares, and it hadn't dawned on Cain that his cell phone was bugged. He was still too caught up in his misery to be able to think critically about the problem. And after running it through his anti-hacker software, he discovered that there was indeed a spyware in his cell phone, and the spyware activated the microphone in his phone, and this allowed the attacker to listen to all of his conversation. And after following this lead, all that Lola was able to find was a disposable cell phone. Someone close to Cain, someone close enough to find his voice irritating, mused Lola, while reading her notes. Someone close enough to know Cain's last name, but not how to spell his first name. Someone close but far away enough that Cain was not able to recognize his voice. Who could it be, I wonder? Carina drove up with Bruno to Eugenia's mansion, and the house sitter allowed her to enter with it into the guest house, and she looked at the house sitter with suspicion. And she realized someone when she saw that he was too old and enfeebled to be the criminal. Yeah, 'cause like the guy who attacked him was able to carry the guy about, so obviously somebody that's physically strong enough to like carry about like somebody who's a beefcake. And usually it's another beefcake themselves, 'cause like beefcake be heavy. 'Cause muscle is heavier than fat. Whatever. She realized when she saw that he was too old and feeble to be the criminal. The pair made their way into the guest house, and they climbed the stairs until they found the room, and they looked to the bedroom without finding anything out of the ordinary. At a certain point, Carina said, "Let's do a reenactment." "All right then," said Bruno, lying down on the bed. "Why do I have to play the bad guy?" pouted Carina. "Because it was your idea," said Bruno with a playful smile painted on his face. I think Kane said that he didn't make it to the bed," said Carina, pointing to the bottom part of the bed. "He's slumped over here, with his knees still touching the floor." Bruno took his starting position. "I then went to pick up the cell phone," said Carina, reenacting the scene, "and I told the 911 operator that everything was fine. And when I was asked to spell my name, I said Kane with a C instead of a K." "The camera then showed you flipping me over," said Bruno, turning around and sitting on the bed. "You closed my bathrobe before lying on top of me, and you turned my head to the side before sinking your fangs into my flesh." Carina hugged Bruno before kissing his neck, and she said, "Tiba was on top of the bed near the cell phone." "Yes, the criminal saw the cat. He called it stupid, so we know that our criminal is not a cat lover," said Bruno. "He also doesn't know the name of the cat," said Carina. "If the cat attacked the bird like Kane thinks he remembers, then what part do you think the cat could have attacked?" asked Bruno. "It depends on how he would be lying," said Carina, and she pushed Bruno on top of the bed. "If I was hovering over you like this, my head or my face would be the closest thing to the cat." The camera showed that he was sitting up with Kane like this, so the hands would be the most likely target, and a cat scratch is bad for you. Only if you're allergic to them, though sometimes you can get a cat scratch fever from the scratch, and after 3 days the scratch will swell and it may have bumps and raised lesions and sometimes spots, and this is usually accompanied with fever, headaches, and loss of appetite. If it doesn't clear up by itself, the patient may require antibiotics. Bruno called Lola to give her this piece of information. If they were lucky, the criminal may have suffered from cat scratch fever. The couple continued to retrace all the steps taken by the criminal. "What happened next?" asked Carina. "According to the tapes, the pair spent half an hour biting Kane's neck," said Bruno. And Carina took her starting position, and she gave Bruno a wicked love bite, and at a certain point she noticed, "This is turning you on, isn't it?" "A little," said Bruno, giving a naughty smile. "Well, get your head out of the gutter," said Carina, sitting back, and then she said, "So then, I see the motion sensor lights turn on in the gardens, and this tips me out that there's someone coming towards the house. And instead of doing the logical thing and fleeing the scene, I make my escape while logging the dead weight by the name of Kane." Carina struggled to pick up Bruno, and Bogo giggling stood up, and the couple gave a cursory look at the room before making their way downstairs, and they walked towards the beach, and from there they attempted to enter the maze of seagrape bushes. And if it wasn't for the yellow tape, they wouldn't have been able to tell that there was a passage hidden within. "A pair must be quite familiar with the area to know that this place by heart in the middle of the night," said Carina. The couple eventually made it to the spot where Lola had found the criminal with his victim, and Carina said, "If he got shot, why isn't there any blood?" "This place was half submerged by high tide, and whatever blood fell on the sand was washed away," said Bruno. "Wow, this guy really oversaw it," said Carina. "He planned for all eventualities except for one," said Bruno. "T-Bones. He didn't plan on T-Bone leading Lola to his location," said Carina. And she added, "And you think the cat might be in danger? After all, this guy went nuts because Kane disrupted his perfect little world." "The guy has to be pretty crazy to target T-Bone next," said Bruno, and he added, "But it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, think about it. You have to be pretty crazy to drug a guy to bite him in the neck in mimicry of a vampire." Dismissing him as crazy is not getting us anywhere, and we need to remember that our perp is cold and calculating, and even as we speak he is plotting his next move, said Carina. Or maybe he's hanging back to see whether the police is onto him or not, and it must make him pretty nervous that Lola has been super hush-hush about his investigation, said Bruno. The only thing we see in the news is about the phantom thief finally getting captured, said Carina, and she added, and can you believe that skank is getting off with just a slap on the wrist? I hear they're making a movie based on her height, said Bruno. Is it possible that both crimes are related, said Carina. It seems a little suspicious that the thief and the home invader will synchronize their attacks. Synchronization is a bit of an exaggeration. First the thief got arrested and then the home invader made his move, said Bruno. The timing is still a bit odd, said Carina. Retreading the crime scene didn't provide any new clues, and Carina returned home with Bruno, and both spent the night talking about the case, and that night Carina lighted a candle for St. Thaddeus. And the patron said her hopeless and the despair, and she prayed an entire rosary before the saint, and she turned off the candle, and when it came time to go to bed, she would have liked for Bruno to pray with her. However, she wasn't one to force her belief onto others. It was not as if Bruno didn't pray. He prayed to his grandmother and nobody else, and both fell asleep in each other's arms, and tomorrow, Sunday, they had a long day ahead of them. Bye-bye and God bless.